Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. So this is the 8th and final episode in our course miniseries on Elevate Your Flip. So to recap you guys, we have published the first 7 episodes, which were outlined episodes with specific content that were meant to build on top of each other. We did those live, we published them. Then a few weeks after all that content was released, we're now doing this episode, which is a general Q&A. So got a few people live with us. We've had a bunch of questions emailed into us. So we're just going to dive into the questions here. And really the whole point of this episode is to help just recap, or not recap, but go through all the information that Derek presented to us. And with anything, there's always a couple missing gaps or a couple missing details or things need clarification. So we want to do this so you guys could ask questions, Derek could provide answers, and then make this the final episode in the course to give you guys really good information. So Derek, welcome back, man. Thank you.
Yeah, Chris, thanks for having me.
So let's just dive into this. People know who you are at this point. They know what we're doing about here.
Sure.
So we're going to dive in the Q&A. So I got the list printed off here in no particular order.
Okay.
So the first question, do you provide general contractors with any sketches to show changes, such as adding islands, windows, or taking down walls, etc.? If not, how do you communicate exactly where something is going to go?
That's a really good question. I think the first way to answer that is that if you are pulling permits, you typically will have to do drawings of some sort, especially if you're removing walls. If you're finishing an unfinished basement, you definitely need to provide sketches. And a piece of advice that I would give with people is to get something that's a little more professional. I've seen contractors try to draw it out on pieces of paper kind of freehand, and that never looks good when you're trying to submit to the city for permitting process. So there's a couple of different programs, and I should know the names of them off the top of my head, but they're free programs where you can just do some basic designs and layouts as to how you're going to reconfigure the part of the house that you have to change.
Like websites or apps or something?
Yeah. I think there's, definitely websites. I'm sure there's different apps. That's something I'm fortunate that my project manager handles. I know a kind of higher level one is called Bluebeam. That's a good one to really be able to dive deep into doing different structural drawings and how you're going to lay out your property. If it's not a super involved job or you're not moving walls, we typically don't need to do layouts per se. We're just going to walk through that with our contract, clearly spell it out in the statement of work. But definitely if you're doing permits, you're going to need to provide them some sort of drawings.
And so with these, I've seen these apps. I've had a bunch of clients send them over to me. They look really, they look like, almost AutoCAD quality.
Yeah.
So are you or your, team, are you guys actually doing the sketches yourself with layout, spacing, or is that something actually hire out to a professional, and who would call that to a professional person to sketch it?
Yeah, so we are doing those sketches when it is a job that's not as all-inclusive and the contractor doesn't maybe have that level of capability. When we're hiring licensed GCs and they're pulling permits and doing a lot of the work, normally they're actually going to do those drawings for us. And then the big key that we do is we all go into that space and physically draw things out to make sure that it makes sense of why you're going to do that. And then
what do you mean physically draw it out?
So you
get the plans.
Yep, get the plans.
And then you go on site and how you drawing it out.
Yeah, so a good example for that would be in an unfinished basement. So we're actually taking chalk and they're snapping chalk lines or drawing lines for how you're going to configure the different bedrooms, bathrooms, the true layout in an unfinished area. You can't really draw something out if you're moving a wall per se of where the wall will go, but it's really just looking at it to make sure that things are functional and make sense the way that you're drawing them out. Because even though it looks good on paper, you inherently get there and it doesn't work, or it's funky, or somebody brings up a good point of how to maximize space. And really that's where you lean on your contractors a little bit too, is to say, I understand what you want to do. Good example is we just did a house in a South Metro suburb, unfinished basement, lot of square footage, and we wanted to get 2 bedrooms in there, but we came across a really good way to make kind of a hybrid bedroom with a little nook for an office. And it's something that we told our contractor, this is our vision, and they had a really good idea, and we went with it. So it's definitely a collaboration of drawing it out when you've got unfinished space, but you're not really able to, draw something out if you've got an existing space you're moving walls on.
Okay, so the punchline is that if it's a licensed GC where you guys are pulling permits, generally they're going to do, I'll say more professional, higher end sketches, not the back of the napkin stuff. Okay.
Yep.
But if it's not, if it's light cosmetic stuff, I guess there's no permit needed. A lot of times you don't need to do like a detailed drawing.
Right.
It's just like, hey, here's a tile, here's the countertop, here's this.
Yeah, we don't really draw that out. That's where your statement of work comes into play. And so you're really just spelling out room by room what you're doing, not necessarily feeling like you need to move the wall or make a drawing to do that, because you're right, it's more cosmetic in nature.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. So next question. Do you require that a supervisor for the general contractor is always on site or checks the work at the end of each day?
That's another good question. I do not require that person is on site. I think you need to just inherently get a feel for work backwards from your big four, make sure you have your timeline. If you're continuing to be on track and their right-hand person is not always there, then I think that's okay. If you feel like things are falling behind because people aren't meeting those deadlines, then I think it makes sense to either have the GC themselves there or their supervisor, their right-hand person, to make sure that the project is going well. And I think that's also a function of how big is your job. Licensed GC is going to have a person there. I think a lot of times, kind of that lead supervisor or foreman, I don't put in my contract. I don't require it. I think it really is just a case by case of how that particular contractor runs their business. And many times if you're doing the non-permitted type of work that is a bit more cosmetic in nature, that person is doing the vast majority of the work themselves. And so you're not worried about them not having their right-hand man there.
And so what about, because it sounds like it's, not your staff, they were going to say the right-hand man or their supervisor. How often do you, or I guess your project manager, what's your rule of thumb for how often he or she's on site?
Sure.
Because there's, hey, they said it's good. And there's you said it's good.
Yeah, that's a great point. On average, we're at a point in our business life cycle that we can be on site for large projects 2 times a week. Usually does not need to be as many as 3. For smaller projects, we can be on site 1 time per week, whether that's me or my project manager. Definitely thinking back to when I very first got started, I feel like you think you need to be there daily, but we really try to kind of teach that system, and every other day should be absolutely plenty, because part of it, it's also you need to get out of the way and let the people work. Yeah. So you're also literally taking up an hour or 2 of their time that they're not working. So on the low end and the entry level end, I think 3 days a week, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, should be completely ample. You should really strive to be 2 days and maybe even 1 day a week.
But definitely having someone check out the work. Right?
Yes, definitely 100% having someone check out the work. I mean, at the very worst case, or maybe not worst case, but just lowest level of involvement is you have to be there a certain amount to actually verify that it's gotten done and then pay the contractors. So inherently that's going to put you on site. But as far as weekly check-ins, that 1 to 3, it should be very realistic.
And this is kind of related to this. Just I don't know, a few days ago before we sat down to record this, I was just perusing like a Bigger Pockets forum thread, and there's some thread about a flip gone wrong in Denver. So, I was just, reading the gossip, and this out-of-state investor bought this flip, decided to GC it themselves, and they never did one on-site inspection on the property.
Oh my gosh.
And so you can guess how that went.
Yeah, great. I'm sure.
Yeah. So they, they were, as they were posting photos, I was just reading the whole thread on there, posting photos, talking about, just, holes in the wall, light fixtures moved over, just sloppy. So just, horrendous job that they're going to have to probably tear down a lot of just to redo it right.
Yep.
Because no one's going to buy that, or, no owner is going to buy it. So, so I think that'd be the extreme. And I'm always I know people do it, but I hear them how can you not be on site when you're spending $100,000 between interest and fix-up costs on the stuff? But people do it.
It is. That's a really good point. I'm surprised that people do it. I mean, as a good evaluation perspective, we're thinking about doing that in Cincinnati, where we own apartment buildings. And so we're trying to create a system to where can we coach a contractor to do it on our behalf, but I'd still need a person, a elevation type of person there a fair amount of time. So that blows my mind that somebody would be comfortable doing
is
that.
That going to be I'm curious, and this might be very preliminary, like a once a week thing or like a once a month? How often do you think you can get the balance of, minimizing whatever expenses you have and hey, cool, they're out there checking to make sure things are going along good enough?
Yeah, I think at a minimum once a week. And then we've got a nice safety valve because we've got property managers there running our apartment complexes. And so I'd also have them secret shop the contractors too, to make sure that things are getting done. But I still think at a minimum. And the other thing is, what blows me away is that person's example of Denver versus Cincinnati, just purely on a cost basis. So you're buying in a much, much lower price point. You're putting in a little bit lesser quality of rehab because that's what the market dictates. Many times it's turnkey rental property. So I'm a little more comfortable thinking that you're fixing up a rental property versus a $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 end product in Denver. That is just mind-boggling.
Yeah, this place was, I think they got for around like, I want to say like high fours, and they were estimating like 100,000 rehab costs.
Oh my gosh!
So you can do the math.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. So this will be a tough question.
Yep.
But how do you have your GC ready to go on day one?
That is another.
That's like a loaded question.
That is a loaded question.
Probably can't guarantee, but what's the best tips?
Yeah, you can absolutely not guarantee it. But what we really try to do is, if your audience has listened to our past episodes, it's really hammering down your big four documents and doing all of that planning in advance so that you can hit the ground running, ideally day one. What that translates to logistically is sometimes it's feasible and sometimes it's not feasible. If you have a property that you're purchasing from the MLS, it's vacant. You can hopefully have your agent get with the seller's agent and schedule showings. And you ideally want to be in that property about 3 times, making sure that you're refining your statement of work, refining your budget, meeting with contractors, then meeting with subcontractors. Really, you're doing all that preliminary work before you close. That's pretty realistic. Gets a little more challenging when you're talking about off-market transactions where you're dealing with a renter who may or may not want to be moving out, a family member who is selling the property, not too excited about it. So still at a minimum, we can try to get into a property twice. You're in there the first time you inspect it. You go under contract. We always typically come back out and do a sewer scope. At that point, we definitely bring a general contractor with us, give them our statement of work, give them our vision so that you can still ideally hit the ground running. Worst case should hopefully be that you've done as much pre-planning as possible, you close, and you should be able to start within that week. You never want to run the deal analysis, buy it, and then start that process because you're going to inherently lose at least a week or 2 minimum.
So just some rough stats here. So the last 10 or 20 flips that you've done, whatever we can think of, do you have a rough percentage of how many of those projects, hey, you started work on day one?
I'd say about 85%.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like we're getting decent at that, but there are challenges. Here's another one is that we get a lot of our properties that the client wants to close and then they want to rent it back. So whether it's a renter that they need time to get out of there, many times people are looking for their other home, job transfers, whatever else. So I guess it depends on how you define that. So we buy it, but we of course can't start day one. We still go through that exact process I just outlined and tell them we're happy to close early, but we're going to be in here 2 or 3 pre-scheduled times for either your renters or you as an owner. And I know you're packing up, but we got to have everything dialed in so that we can start day one. But then there's times where good deals come up and we close in 7 to 10 days, and you can try to do that planning, but you're closing on a Friday, which most people like to do from a seller perspective. And you're starting, let's call it worst case, hopefully by the next Friday, but this should not be a long process, even if you're buying in a super short timeline. But
if the deal is good enough, you're happy sitting a few days
post-closing
to get the stuff figured out, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And a good lesson learned is we did a deal, I'm trying to think, probably late 2018, where it was a super short timeline, but for an amazing opportunity. And I rushed into trying to get it going as fast as humanly possible. And one of our analysis points, because we try to look back at each deal on an annual basis and say what went right, what went wrong, and troubleshoot. And I think had I actually given myself an extra week of just kind of strategic and non-stressed out planning, it probably would have gone a little bit better. So I think you got to balance your work style with your contractors rather than just gung-ho rush in and start day one.
That's a good punchline. So don't get fixated on the day, but make sure it makes sense in the big picture.
Yeah.
All right. So another question, are every one of your subs, general contractors, handymen, etc., licensed and insured? I don't know if handyman and license actually go in the same sentence, right?
Yeah, that is 100% correct. Definitely not licensed. That's really the definition of a handyman. It's kind of like that jack of all trades, but there's definitely a ceiling on how much they're willing to do, comfortable doing, quality work. So yeah, many of the kind of handyman people we have are not licensed. And they're typically doing that kind of entry level type of work, or that true cosmetic, carpet, paint, changing light fixtures, changing cabinet hardware, things like that. But then when we go to our general contractors, that is really the delineation line of, by definition, is a licensed contractor. They are all licensed. And then there is a little bit of that middle ground of person who has the skill set, but maybe they have had a license. Sometimes people let their licenses lapse because they don't want to pay, because you have to be licensed at each individual county. So sometimes they might not be licensed, but again, you're leaning those people towards a little bit more cosmetic work. I think the one thing that I would give people as a precaution is vetting your contractors. And we have almost this new questionnaire that we've developed to make sure that you are kind of asking the right questions. And that is making sure that the person who says that they are licensed, it's actually their license. There is a lot of work in Denver, and many times a person will have a license and then someone will work on their behalf. So at the end of the day, the person that can file the lien on your property is the person who has the license, not the unlicensed person. Or you're trying to enforce that work is being done, and there's this disconnect because, and we had it happen once where I looked on the permit, and the name on the permit for that license was not the person who was working for me. So I quickly said, who's this guy? And then we realized that, oh, I've worked for, Jim Smith Plumbing or whatever for years. He just is semi-retired. He has his license. He lets us all do the work. That's a red flag. It works, not to say that it doesn't, but I would be careful about that, because there's another layer of complexity and another step away from that person who truly has the license.
Yeah. And something I've learned over the years is, with handymen, and that's why I was kind of chuckling when I read the question, because every year I hear this from clients or their investors, is like, don't let your handyman do plumbing work or electrical work.
Yeah.
Because I can think of two stories last year where units got flooded from handyman plumbing work.
Yes.
So
yep, you're
$190 an hour for plumbers. What I've learned.
Yep, you're totally right. And that's really part of your vetting process too, is hopefully you're finding that handyman or that good jack of all trades, but normally they'll do what they call light plumbing and electrical, which is just defined as they'll change a faucet, they'll change a light fixture, but beyond that, you don't want them doing that work. They don't want to do that work. And you can actually streamline your project a little more, having that person do their work, having the electrician crank things out, having the plumber crank things out. So I think that's a really good point.
All right. So for another question, for the daily burn rate, and that is calculating what your expenses are and one of your metrics from the spreadsheet earlier, how do you figure out how long construction will take at the beginning of the project? Oh, that's a good one.
That is a good one. And I thought about that one when that was coming in. And I think that you're backing into that based on what your timeline is going to be. So your daily burn, there's not really a way, in my opinion, to manipulate that number or try to make it lower. It's really inherently just a matter of how much you're spending on your project and how long is it going to take. So you just want to look at that and make sure that it's not too high, especially for the return that you're trying to go for or the net profit. So I think that's the way to look at it. You really don't look at it and say, the project's going to take me 67 days, so that's going to be within my daily burn rate. The daily burn for us inherently just gets figured out based on the calculation. And that was more for, I think, a select group of people that might have a private money lender that is their source of capital. And they want to know, because they're investing in other spaces, how much of my money are you using and how fast? So it's almost more for that lender side of things rather than your metric that you're really, really looking at, because it'll work itself out if the rest of your ROI, net profit, and dollars per day are within your guidelines.
Let me ask this question differently, because I interpret this differently. So taking out the daily burn, in general, how do you figure out how long construction will take on each project?
Oh, okay. There we go. That's a good question. And actually, I think very, very applicable. That would be also based on the amount of work that you're doing. So when you're going through and you're doing your 1-page budget rehab sheet, you're looking at how much work you're going to have to do. Definitely, we don't have a really dialed in formula for if you're doing 27 things, it equals 58 days.
Yeah.
I think a little bit of that is nuance and experience, but I think you can look at that and put together your statement of work. Then I think where you really do refine that number is you then give it to the contractor or the 2 or 3 that you're going to have bid the project, and you need to hold them to the timeline. So it's, here's the amount of work we want to do. How long do you think it'll take? And actually working off of them too. I can easily give general guidelines because this is the data that we've found over the last 5 years, is that for a relatively cosmetic condo or townhome that's under 1,000 square feet, you're in that 30 to 45 day rehab window. And then if you're working on a single family home that's 1,000 to roughly 2,000 square feet, you're easily going to be in that 8 to 12 week window as far as how long the rehab's going to take. And if it's a pretty big house, kind of above 2,500 square feet, that classic 2-story with a basement, 5-bedroom, 3-bathroom type of house, that's going to be a 3 to 4 month type of window. So we can easily give those general guidelines, but we don't really have, I'd be curious to see, folks that feel like if we're doing X number of things, it equals a certain number of days, but we haven't gotten that.
Well, working with a contractor makes more sense because they can, do it. So I kind of just a question I have now looking at this or hearing you talk about this. So with the, let's just say the GC says, hey, it'll take 30 days. I think you said in one of the podcasts that a lot of times, you have some penalty if you don't deliver by this date.
Yes.
A little bit of grace period. Here's a penalty. Is the penalty equal to your daily burn? Like for every day you're late, it's equal to $225. Basically, that way you're just breaking even. Is that how you structure it?
Yeah, that's exactly how I structure it. It works out that way, that it's roughly close to your daily burn or close to what you're paying in interest each month. Then I think there's just the dollars of what is someone willing to agree to. If you put a $400 per day penalty on there, no contractor is going to sign it. And if you do it too low, it's not really doing you any benefit. So we refine that on, what's our daily burn? I just want to kind of cover my costs. And actually a good example that we had that literally just happened on a project that we're almost done with in Arvada is we are working with a new contractor. He and his crew have been phenomenal. He gave us a 6-week actually, he gave us a 5-week timeline, and I thought there is no way he's going to be done that fast. So we even said, let's make it 6 weeks. Let's tee everybody else up for success. And we had a bonus tied to that. And he crushed that number. And internally between myself and my team, I said, let's plan on 8 weeks. I mean, I will be super happy at 8 weeks because it was a full house remodel. But just the quality work that this guy does and the way he's adopting our system, he's got his own system. I was super happy with it. So it's almost like don't set unrealistic expectations because then you're both setting yourself up to be frustrated. So, and then conversely, you don't want them to say, oh, it's going to be a 12-week job and you're giving them a 900 square foot cosmetic condo. There's got to be some give and take there, but be realistic or else you're both going to be frustrated.
So that 6-week example, did he get it in 5 weeks then?
He got it in between 5 and 6 weeks.
Wow.
He could have hit 5 if he would have, done crazy weekends and a couple of different things, but in our mind we just said no, let's just stick with that. And it's also don't let the quality of the product suffer too. So it is that balance, but no, he knocked it out of the park and we've been super happy.
If you don't mind sharing, what's the general, like, hey, great, you meet the deadline or exceed or do it earlier, how do you kind of structure a bonus for that?
Yeah, so normally we're in the $500 to $1,000 range for a bonus for your smaller properties, your quicker condos and townhomes, things that are under $300,000, and then we're usually $1,000 to $1,500 for bonuses for your traditional type of properties. So you want it to be an incentive, but obviously you can't do it too much or else your margins are going to get a little tight. But we really want everybody kind of on the same page and shooting for the same deadline.
Well, I mean, that's a good chunk of money if that makes a difference between, that's a good motivator.
And at the end of the day, that's hopefully, hopefully they're taking care of their guys too, but that's probably just straight profit in their pocket. They're making some money or there might be a fee or they're doing decently based on the work, but that truly is kind of more than likely their nice personal kicker. And if we're doing 5 projects in a year with somebody and they can make an extra $5 to $7 grand for doing the same amount of work, hopefully they're pretty happy and we get it done faster. So again, if we can get a little time saved or best case scenario, get one more deal in, we're exponentially better off.
All right. Next question.
Okay.
How can you come up with accurate repair estimates since you have not seen the house prior to writing your offer, since many times the pictures are not accurate representations of the condition of the property? non-accurate pictures? That never happens.
I know. Shocking. Shocking. Or pictures that you're right don't even exist. And also, if you're talking to an off-market buyer, seller, you're not gonna see a picture of anything. So that really goes back to asking tons of questions, trying to get them to describe. And here's another kind of tip that we look at is when you say, instead of how good a condition is your kitchen, we really try to hone in on dates. We say, have you replaced a furnace or hot water heater or so on and so forth in under 5 years? No. Under 10 years? No. Because that definition of, oh, things are good, or, oh, I've never had a sewer line problem, that doesn't really help us out. But if you really nail down dates to it, you start to realize that we're going to have to probably replace certain aspects of the project. And then it's also based on us knowing that usually if the price is right, it's going to be in bad shape. So you're going to have to usually redo a lot of those aspects of the house.
So the way I'm interpreting this is that sounds like you're pretty much assuming you're going to redo all the cosmetic stuff.
Yes, 100%.
And based on square footages, you can figure that out, and you know, neighborhood and price point. But then you're trying to figure out more for the mechanicals and the capital expenditure items. What the estimate might be for replacing it. Because the first is 5 years or newer. Great. Probably just clean it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, but there's really not a hard and fast rule if you don't have good pictures, but really, you do revert back to the reason why you're probably getting a shot at this property is it needs to be totally redone. So you're starting to budget that everything cosmetically is done, and then you're vetting in how many major systems you have to do, and that's going to give you your rehab budget. And that's kind of the way you do it using that one sheet too.
So 2 questions baked into this one. So if it's MLS, you know, I'm assuming you're just using the standardized contract, so you can always still have your inspection termination. Terminate, get your earnest money back. So I'm assuming you still do your full inspection. Oh, hey, this makes sense, or we need to terminate or renegotiate the price, right?
Correct.
Now, if you have say a wholesaler or somewhere where your earnest money has to go hard, would you write an offer with hard earnest money without seeing the property?
I personally don't. All of our earnest money is refundable, even in our off-market deals. But we're really upfront with the people that we're buying properties from. We tell them, getting in and seeing the property, again, we're assuming that we're going to have to do everything. So our numbers have to work close enough for us to see the property. And then we go under contract and we tell them we're going to do a sewer line inspection and a structural review. That gives us the ability to say, hey, either, unfortunately, there's a lot more going on than what you told us on the phone. And again, we're many times still very interested. We just might want to buy it at a little better price point. Your sewer line might be shot. You've got structural problems. That's kind of just the way to go about it versus the MLS is really clear cut. But that's a great point you bring up. Working with wholesalers, you have to be prepared and willing to either lose earnest money or know that you've got a good enough rehab budget allocated to still make the numbers work if lots of things are going wrong. Because your $10,000 earnest money is hard the time that you commit. So
it sounds like too, a lot of times you're talking with the seller, wholesaler, or whatever. The way I'm reading that is this: you're just taking the time of communicating the process. And this, where I could see a lot of times people don't.
Correct.
And I just kind of go into sales and making deals happen in general. Is that usually times the more you communicate, usually the better chance you have of putting the deal together. So you are clearly communicating the process and your expectations, and kind of also handling probably a lot of their concerns.
And it's a phrase that we use a lot, but I think it's super truthful, and either the deal is going to work or it's not. I mean, when you think about it, there really shouldn't be much gray area if they're being truthful to us and we're being respectable and responsible to them. The numbers for the most part are going to work or they're not. And I always say this too, that's okay if it doesn't. I mean, if somebody's going to offer a bunch more for the property or maybe use it as a rental, or I can't compete with the margins, then great. I've said it before, then you should have that person buy your house immediately. But if we can add value and we can do it in a fair manner, then that's great too. Same thing with the on-market properties too. We got to be really, really close or it's not going to work, and we won't even submit an offer. And that's where we have that kind of conversation from one agent to another to make sure it works. If not, that's okay, because we'll be here if you guys want to cut the price later, or hey, if you can sell it to somebody else, that's awesome. Go for it. I mean, it's going to work or it's not. It shouldn't be that complicated.
That makes sense. All right, next one. So the cost analysis spreadsheet does not include plumbing in the major systems. How do you handle that estimate?
Yeah, usually the plumbing numbers are factored into how much you're spending in your bathrooms to do remodeling, how much you're spending in your kitchen to do remodeling. We haven't come across many or unfinished spaces where you have to add those two areas. We haven't come across too many properties where you have to replumb the entire house necessarily. And I guess that's more just a function of the houses that we've gone after. So we don't really have a line item for extra certain amount of dollars for plumbing, even though it is a major system per se. It's more inherently baked into each individual room should pick up the vast majority of your extra plumbing costs.
Okay. So how did you learn how to visualize the remodel? Things like walls coming down, kitchen layout. And is it something that you would call instinctive?
Yeah.
Or is that something you trained yourself?
That's a really good question.
Or 3,000 hours of HGTV.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that is a note I jotted down. I think it totally makes sense to watch a ton of HGTV, and you can have your significant other listen to this podcast to say we told them to do that, and you're not just being lazy. But no, I seriously think there's a lot of that. I subscribe to every design magazine out there. I want to see what smart designers are doing. I think you really need to talk to your kitchen designer. That would be a key person on your team. That still kitchens to this day for us are not, inherently perfectly crystal clear the day that we walk in and say, oh yeah, let's just design it this way. It still makes sense to have a third set of eyes on it. They'll also lay that out into the CAD to look at things from a 3D perspective. So I would say it's half instinctive and half deciding to refine your taste, and half just lots of hours of consuming meat. That's where I would scroll on Instagram, or I would watch HGTV. Talk to designers, try to develop those relationships, rather than, I don't think this is something where you have to feel like, oh, I have to be a creative or an artist or use that side of my brain to be good at this part of the business, but you have to put in time and energy and really stay current with it.
So it's interesting just kind of hearing your perspective. I read this question. My immediate thing is like, that's not me. I'm outsourcing that. And this is coming from someone who can like hardly dress himself, as my wife will point out with the shoes I wear often.
Right.
And I would throw in there, like, sometimes people are good at that, or they got that mindset. For me, like, no matter what, like, I would just spend a crazy amount of time and just spin my wheels and get nowhere.
Yeah. That's a good point. I think that's where you're right. You look at where's your skill set lie, and that probably is a no-brainer to bring in an interior designer and have them work with you on whether it's forever, if you want to just keep outsourcing that, or at least a handful of the first couple of properties, and just give you a sense of what that looks like. We always rely on our stagers too, even though it's after the fact, but they're really good at looking at layout and how will furniture lay out. So, but yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. Definitely bring in a professional that's going to speed up your process or reduce anxiety.
Well, plus, I'd be laying awake at night just worrying about getting nowhere. And I would, in a heartbeat, I'm like, cool, I'm gonna spend $1,000 or $2,000, whatever it costs to have a professional interior designer come in and look at it. So I would add in there, like, know yourself and know your strength. If it's not your strength, find someone whose strength it is and partner or pay them.
Totally.
So this might be tough, but during the Q&A, can you show us some examples of one of your finished flips? I don't think we have any photos loaded up for this, right?
You know what, we don't. I think that's a good point. We can go back and do some research and upload some of those images, or your audience can reach out to you or through you or to us, and we were happy to share some of our last couple projects that people can jump on the MLS and look at the after pictures. So yeah, I don't have it kind of readily available, but that's super realistic. And then we're also developing kind of almost like, think back to your old school days when everybody was in school, of your professors having office hours. So we're going to develop in 2020 kind of elevation office hours, when we know we're going to be on site at projects and people can come just check out what we're doing and have kind of an open Q&A. So we're going to probably fire that up quarterly and do meetups on site rather than just in a classroom or in a bar or something like that. So
that's cool.
Well, we'll keep people posted that and just do them on site.
And something else too to throw on top here is, one of the ideas we have written down is that once we finish this, now 8-part series on the Elevate Your Flip course, we'll do probably like a quarterly episode update with some market stats, trends, but hopefully a couple projects that you or your partner clients have done, and that way we can also show some examples, numbers and pictures as well. So be on the lookout for that in the future, just kind of going forward. So future episodes and those on-site meetups, sounds like, that's going to be the best.
definitely.
Do you have an actual checklist for the blue tape inspection? And before you answer that, remind people what the blue tape inspection is.
Yeah, so the blue tape inspection, or that punch list, is your last amount of details that you're making sure look really, really good before you put it on the market. And it's physically you taking that blue painter's tape and walking around and putting it on areas of imperfection that your contractor needs to finish up before they get their last and final payment. And that's actually really good timing. We are creating that right now. I'm really always trying to think of which things feel inherent to me and I'm just doing, or now I'm translating down to my project manager, and we need to take that out of our heads and put that on paper. So yeah, we are actually doing that right now and developing this extra checklist for things that you should look for, and then things that you should have another person and another set of eyes, whether it's your business partner, your spouse, your stager, whoever, look at something and make sure it truly just looks good. So not yet, but actually very intuitive. We're actually developing that right now.
Great. So on condos, when you're trying to get your $100,000 spread between purchase price and after repair value or sales value, do those typically involve taking down walls and creating an open floor plan? Or can you typically achieve that $100,000 spread with only cosmetic changes?
Yeah, so that normally will include one wall takedown. So in our budgeting rehab spreadsheet, we have typically it's found in the kitchen area. We've got our kind of small, medium, and large type of pricing philosophy. So you've got a $500 expense allocated towards a non-load bearing wall that you're taking down and opening things up. You've got a medium-sized load-bearing wall that you're taking down, where it's that $1,000 to $1,500 range, or you're doing a lot of reconfiguring where you're $2,000 and above. I would say normally for the condos and townhomes, structurally, not a lot of those interior walls are load-bearing because the only areas you're going to normally open up are the kitchen, living room, dining room type of area. So normally you can take those down. It's not load-bearing, so you have a little extra cost, so $500 to $1,000. But not a huge expense that you feel like, oh man, I've got to know that on the front end and really hit that amount of money, or have a $105,000 spread. So normally our $100,000 spread takes into account anything you need to do, and it's light, cosmetic, opening up a half kitchen wall. You're really not doing much when it comes to a condo.
Great. A question. I think this was referencing back an earlier one that I missed looking at the Q&A box. You did not. This is going back to design ideas for kitchen layouts, all that stuff. You did not mention new construction. Do you get ideas from new construction? That's a really interesting idea.
That's a really good one. Yeah, actually, I would throw out attend the Parade of Homes. That's a really neat event that happens.
What is that? I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so that is one that happens in Denver, summertime. It's been happening for a long time, and it is the top builders and designers of homes that get selected, and it's like a showcase. It's been a little while since I've been to that, but you pay an admission and you get to see all the super cool homes that people open their or see individual floor plans and layouts of people opening up their home and showing you those. So you can do that. Yeah, definitely new builds and new design is really, really important.
Do you ever go walk model homes at the Lennar or whatever builders?
Yep, I will. I do that a little bit less because the style of homes that we're remodeling is normally something that's been around and been existing. And so it's hard to incorporate that, but small style pieces, yeah, absolutely. So maybe not design or big picture layouts, but definitely style pieces from new builders. I think that's...
And style, you're talking like flooring, tile, countertops, that type of stuff?
Yep, exactly. So what type of fixture and finishes are you putting in versus how do I create this layout? They've got a blank canvas, so I think it's a little easier for them, but definitely kind of those fixtures and finishes you can refine.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, those guys spend their money on their market research.
Yes.
And model homes, they're easy to go walk, and you get your free Coke and cookies. And go enjoy it, right?
Yep, absolutely. No, that was a great point by a listener. That was good call.
So, okay, I think it's the last question. If there's more, type them in the box, and then we'll start wrapping things up here.
Yeah.
So do you have a hard and fast rule for when to use a licensed GC versus the jack of all trades contractor?
Yeah. So the easy answer to that question is anytime you're pulling a permit, you 100% have to use a licensed GC. They have to have a license to be able to pull that permit. And then, so that let's say that takes out probably 60 to 70% of the work that we do. It's clear cut whether it needs, you need a licensed GC if you want to pull a permit. And then you start to get into thinking more along the lines of condos and townhomes using a licensed contractor or general contractor versus not. Again, I wish I had a a specific line in the sand that I could draw of say yes or no. But I think once you get past doing the cosmetic carpet, tile, changing out light fixtures, faucets, maybe painting older looking cabinets, but still in good shape versus putting in new cabinets. But if you're that, I would be okay with a non-licensed contractor, always an insured contractor, but non-licensed. You still want to lean towards somebody that probably has a license if you are still redoing an entire kitchen, or you're moving any type of plumbing, even though you might be moving it from one wall to another wall. There's still some skill level that needs to be there, and I think having that license really helps. So there's not really a hard and fast rule once you get out of having a permit. I think you just have to do kind of a gut check. But I guess with all that being said, there's some people that are amazing quality and have just let their license lapse. I'd probably go with that person over a person who is super green and went right out and got a license. I think that's fine. It's just your level with the contractor and that level of work that you need to have done.
So since the permit pulling is kind of, I'll say, the litmus test, how do you know what needs a permit pulled and what doesn't?
Yeah, that's another really good question. Usually if you're doing anything where you are moving load-bearing walls, you're going to need a permit. Anything that deals with adding egress windows, you're going to need permits. Finishing unfinished square footage, typically you need a permit to do that. I'm trying to think of other kind of easy tried and true reasons to do permitting.
What about stuff for mechanicals, furnaces, water heaters, roofs, sewer lines? What do that stuff needs?
Yeah, and a lot of that you can actually pull what they call a trade permit. So an electrician, the rest of the house could be in good shape. You're again doing a little bit more cosmetic type of remodel, but the electrical panel is old. You want that electrician, a licensed electrician, able to pull a permit to properly redo an electrical panel. And it's super simple. It's not a big incremental cost. It doesn't, hurt your timeline very much. We 100% gladly pay contractors to be licensed and pull a permit to do a panel, for example. And many times you can do that with HVAC and mechanical. If you're pulling out an old furnace, putting in a new furnace, but not changing everything else around, you can definitely do that type of permit. Versus if you're moving walls, if you're finishing unfinished square footage, you've got a lot of work going on. You want a whole home permit, which means you're going to have to pass every type of inspection known to man. But again, that's inherently just the cost of doing business and the time of doing business.
All right. Another question came in here. What is the best strategy to start finding contractors?
That's another good question. That's an ongoing process for us. We are always figuring out ways to find new contractors. I think you can look digitally and you can, search plumber, electrician, contractor, general contractor in your area. There's a lot of different aggregate websites, whether it's an Angie's List, whether it's a Home Advisor, now being bought out by Home Advisors. I think you can do those. I think that's important. Another one that we do is get on Nextdoor, which is an app for you living in a specific area, in a specific neighborhood, and your neighbors are constantly posting that they either have a good person or need a good person. And so just take all of that data and start interviewing those contractors, because that's really, really important. And then it goes back to what we were actually talking about before this started, is the eye test. And it's literally our kind of sweet spot of contractor is, if you're in Home Depot and you see a truck or a van that's in good shape, but not disastrous shape, but not a $50,000 truck with a 10-inch lift on it, I don't know if I can afford to pay for that person. But I also don't want something that the guy's, always jumping his car because it's dead. You want that nicely maintained Chevy or Ford or Dodge or whatever, and a kind of, decent logo on the side with legible information on there. I want to talk to that guy, and I will actually take a picture of that truck. I'll call that person. I'll introduce that person. We've had our project manager meet people at Home Depot and Lowe's. Definitely talking with other investors. We always are kind of sharing, especially when it comes to subcontractors, information. We've got kind of an elevation, properly vetted list of people that we work with, and it's always evolving. Some people are kind of dropping off or going down the food chain and becoming kind of the handyman level. And some people, like the person we just mentioned that did our job up in Arvada, that will become our number one person that we want to work with, day in and day out. So it really just depends. But digitally, I'd search. network and next door type of things I'd search, Home Depot I'd search. And then it's really a matter of coming up with your questions and criteria of how to interview those contractors, and then calling references and looking at their work.
Great. Well, I think that is all the questions.
Yeah.
So thank you, Derek. And I forgot to mention at the beginning of this, throughout the last, couple months, we've been recording and then producing and throwing them out there. We've had lots of great feedback from people. Our staff had lots of great emails from people saying they were enjoying the series.
Good.
So I want to make sure you saw that feedback, because I usually don't forward a lot of those emails to you.
Yeah, thank you.
And just kind of going forward, so everyone knows, just some future resources to plug into here, because one of my bigger goals for putting this course together was a lot of people come ask me for flipping questions and references. I'm always happy to connect with the idea of karma in mind, and hopefully people throw back some rental deals in my direction, since I'm not looking for flip deals.
Yeah.
All that general networking and hey, we all can pass stuff back and forth. So be on the lookout for, Derek's got his, what do you call it? The kind of office hours on-site meetups.
Yep.
And we'll put links in there. We'll be doing some, I think we're going to probably be doing a quarterly, webinar podcast with those market updates, a few case studies. And then you've got a few services that you're starting to offer with clients. One of your business moves is to go from not just flipping, but the teaching.
Yes.
You have your academy coming up.
Yep.
You've got partnership flips you do, and you've also just do some general consulting as well.
One-on-one consulting.
Yeah. And so you guys can definitely get all the details. Check out the show notes on the website. You can reach out to Derek, get the more details on there. I've also mentioned them in the past episodes. So Derek, before we hit stop on this final recording for now, final thoughts, anything like that? Yeah, no,
I just really want to thank you for having me on. This has been a super fun way to experience a new marketing medium and a way to share our ideas. And I am such a huge believer. Again, one of our company philosophies is full circle value. So I'm excited to hear what the your listening community has to bring back to us. And people always have great ideas that we're going to borrow, and hopefully we can lend our ideas to other folks and we can all do more business. So I know it sounds kind of cliche, but I'm excited to talk to your audience and us continue to work together. So thank you. Seriously.
You're welcome. All right, everyone. Thank you for listening and watching. And Derek, thank you for your time.
Thanks.